YouTube, how's it going? n8great321 back again, and today, inspired by a video from a fellow YouTuber, Sloop John H, I figured I would show you my Smiths collection. Now, if you're a fan of the Smiths, or even if you're not, and you just kind of want to know more information about them, there's obviously plenty of information on the internet. There's a lot of books written about the band. There's plenty of videos on YouTube, some documentaries, but at least from personal experience, one that I've read that I found pretty enjoyable was A Light That Never Goes Out, an enduring saga of the Smiths by Tony Fletcher. I believe this is a newer book. It doesn't have direct interviews with Morrissey or Johnny Marr, which is kind of an oversight, but I think she tried, but maybe they weren't too interested. But it does have interviews with Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce, as well as other people that worked with the Smiths or were involved with them and Rough Trade and things like that. So it is fairly comprehensive. The first quarter of the book goes into the history of Manchester and sort of how it developed as an industrial city, and it goes back to World War II and prior to that, and really dives into the history of everything that sort of culminated in the forming of the Smiths and sort of what their music represents and things like that. So if you want a pretty comprehensive history, this is a pretty good book, obviously pretty thick book, but if you're a fan of the band, it's recommended read for sure. I'm going to go through the albums I have chronologically. I have a mix of studio albums as well as 12-inch singles. I'm a big fan of 12-inch singles, especially 80s albums. And the Smiths are one of those bands that put out so many singles and so many quality singles, a lot of songs that you don't really find on the studio albums. So really, if you're a fan, just getting the studio albums only sort of scratches the surface. You really want to get into some of those singles, and it's pretty rewarding part of collecting the band. Also frustrating because sometimes they're kind of hard to find and expensive. I had to import a lot of mine from the UK, which shipping and everything like that wasn't the cheapest, but it's just part of the hobby. It's something that's really cool about collecting this band in particular, and something I really enjoy. So going chronologically through my collection, we start in 1983 with the This Charming Man 12-inch single. There are multiple versions of this. Some have the band name up here, some don't. This version is what's known as the New York version. It is a UK release on Rough Trade, but it's called the New York version because it's kind of a club remix version. You can see down there it says a remix by Francis Kevorkian at Right Track Studios in New York, so that's why it's called the New York version. From what I remember, I believe this version wasn't really approved by the band. They weren't really out to be a sort of a club dance act, so there's the label right there, that sort of iconic Rough Trade, very plain sort of label. So they didn't really like this version. It's not too much different from the original, at least the A side, which is the vocal side. The B side is an instrumental, or like a dub version, which I don't really listen to too much, but it's obviously one of my favorite songs. It's one of their most iconic songs, and just to have kind of the 12-inch single version is really neat. I wouldn't mind seeking out the actual 12-inch single with the normal B sides on it, but again, I'd probably have to import and things like that. So for now, this does the job fine. And from there, fast forward to 1984 with the eponymous debut album, The Smiths. Plenty of classic tracks on here. This is a US pressing on Sire. Real Around the Fountain opens with that. That was one of their first singles. This Charming Man, Still Ill, Hand in Glove. I think on this album I actually prefer the B side. I think the A side's a little kind of uneven. It has its moments, but I think at least, especially towards the end of the A side, it kind of drones on, which I know is sort of, I think a lot of people probably think the Smiths are this sort of droning, miserable band, but really, the first side really kind of, to me, is a little uneven. There's the label, that Sire kind of yellow label, but the B side here is absolutely fantastic. It opens with This Charming Man, Still Ill, Hand in Glove, What Difference Does It Make? So there's some awesome singles on there. I actually got this album first on CD before I ever found the record. This is the CD. I just found it used at a local record store. I think this is a maybe 80s or early 90s US CD. So had that before I found the record. Found the record at a local record show maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. But really glad to have this one. I know maybe amongst Smiths fans it's not their favorite, and certainly not my favorite among the studio albums, but still a ton of iconic singles. I think their early stuff, at least in my opinion, is probably their best stuff. So if you're a Smiths collector, obviously a must-have right here. The very same year that they released their self-titled debut album, they're already putting out more singles. This one is Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, 12-inch Rough Trade single with that iconic Viv Nicholson cover photo. And you know, that's one of the things that really impressed me the most about the Smiths, is how prolific of songwriters they were, that, you know, the record company can't even keep up. They put out a full album and already they're pushing out even more singles that same year. So like I said, A-side, Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. B-side, Girl Afraid and Suffer Little Children. Show the album here. I guess in the sleeve, it's just a sort of Rough Trade label, kind of a gray back with a kind of yellowish, orangish text to it. But a really great song. And you know, like I said before, if you're not getting these singles and you're not getting the compilations, if you're just sticking to the studio albums, you're really only scratching the surface of what they did. So there's a ton of work out there that they didn't even get into those studio albums. So that's what I enjoyed collecting probably the most of this band. It's just the sheer kind of variety of good songs that they have. Another 12-inch single from 1984. This might be my favorite one that I have of the 12-inch singles. Is William, It Was Really Nothing. Again, UK Rough Trade release. A-side, like I said, William, It Was Really Nothing. But I really like this, and a lot of the 12-inch singles for the B-sides, really. This one has How Soon Is Now, which is probably the most well-known song, which honestly isn't my favorite, but you know, it's an iconic song, and it sounds good on the 12-inch 45 single here. And the last song on here, one of my absolute favorite songs are there, Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want. Very short song, but it is just such a great song. I love that song. And it's been, you know, covered a million times, and I think it was on Pretty in Pink, the soundtrack, and it was covered, a version of it, to Ferris Bueller. You know, I'm sure you've heard it or some version of it in the past. There is the label, green with sort of darker green text on it, Rough Trade. So around the same time, we're still in 1984, and quite honestly, at least in the UK, the response to the debut album was kind of mixed. I think a lot of those songs were re-recorded or were edited in a little bit different way than what a lot of fans were used to. The songs they had heard them maybe play live at shows or on the radio or things like that. And like I said, they were putting out plenty of other hit songs that weren't on that debut album. So the record company, Rough Trade, kind of had to scramble and figure out some kind of solution. So that came out in the form of the Hat Full of Hollow, which is sort of a compilation, but I like to think of it as sort of a companion piece to their debut album. This features a bunch of songs that were on the debut album, but different versions of it. You know, John Peel recordings or different sort of live versions, I guess you could say, but just different takes. You know, like for instance, This Charming Man version on here is a little more kind of upbeat. Definitely sounds different than their debut album. I almost prefer this version a little bit. It just sounds so much different. And it also includes a lot of those 12-inch singles that I mentioned. It has Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, William, It Was Really Nothing, and things like that. It's a pretty good album. I think that a lot of people really enjoy this one. I do too. It's got a kind of neat gatefold shot of the band there. They never released this domestically in the US, I don't believe. They have reissued it, so you can find it pretty easily that way. This is a UK Rough Trade version I got on eBay from the UK. Again, I think the highlight for me on this one, like I said, the different version of This Charming Man I really enjoy. And then it has Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want, which like I said is one of my favorite songs today. And the version they have on here of Back to the Old House is fantastic, really haunting, just sort of good. I think it's just Morrissey and Johnny Marr. I don't think they have any other rhythm section there, so it's very sort of intimate, very just haunting. Great guitar work as always by Johnny Marr, and then Morrissey's voice obviously has that sort of quality to it. I like this version better, and I think the studio version came out on their last album. I don't have that one, so I don't really know for sure, but I definitely prefer this version of Back to the Old House. So, Smith's Hat Full of Hollow. And actually, forgot to mention, I also have this on CD. I think this is maybe a later 90s. This is a German release, and I found this at my local record store for whatever reason. It was $5. I bought this after I already had the vinyl, but I said, yeah, for $5 I'm definitely going to have this just to play in the car and kind of burn on the computer. So kind of a lucky find there, but Hat Full of Hollow, got a good one for sure. And so we move out of 1984 and into 1985 with their second studio album, and probably my personal favorite, Meat is Murder. Again, another very iconic cover of theirs. I said it before, mine's a US pressing on Sire, but one thing you will notice, kind of an interesting thing, look at the track listing on here, How Soon Is Now isn't listed on here, and that's because it wasn't on the original UK release, but because it became such a big hit, Sire or Rough Trade or some combination of both decided to kind of shoehorn it into the US version, so it does appear on the actual album. It's on the label, it's in the track listing, it starts off the B-side, but it originally didn't. So Headmaster Ritual, Rush All Ruffians, I Want the One I Can't Have. That song doesn't get a ton of love, but that's actually one of my favorites on this album. You know, I think top to bottom, I don't think there is a snoozer on here. Everything is a dynamite, awesome song, except, in my opinion, the very last song, and it has nothing to do with the subject matter. The song's Meat is Murder, by the way. Has nothing to do with the subject matter. I got nothing against vegetarianism or anything like that. It's just such a slow, droning, boring song, and musically I can't find anything to like about it. It is just such a dull ending to the song, or the album. And you know, other than that, everything is absolutely A+. I love every single song on here except that one. But despite that, still probably my favorite studio album of theirs. So fast forward another year to 1986 to their most popular, well-known studio album, The Queen is Dead, a US Sire pressing here. Just, again, a ton of amazing songs on here. The Queen is Dead, the opening track, just such a cool kind of drum riff to open things up, and it really sets the tone for the whole thing. Cemetery Gates, Big Mouth Strikes Again, Boy with a Thorn in His Side, just a ton of fantastic songs on here. Slightly below Meat is Murder in my opinion, but still absolutely essential. You know, if you're a fan of 80s alternative, even if you don't really like this band that much, if you're going to pick up one album, this is probably the one you should get. This is the one that's most well known. This is where I started my collection with them, released on vinyl, so I think that's probably the starting point for most people. Absolutely fantastic album. I don't know if I can say more than what's already been said about it, but really, really great. Now, as far as their 12-inch singles go, I tend to like the earlier stuff a little bit more, but this one may be one of the more interesting ones I have. This is a 12-inch single for Panic, which is a good song. You know, maybe not my favorite, but it's a really cool song. Catchy song for sure. But what's interesting about this is actually a German release, and it is on a kind of clear blue vinyl, which looks pretty sharp. I'm not normally a colored vinyl kind of guy. I don't really seek them out, but this came up and it was a good price. Again, I had to import it from the UK, I think. But another thing, outside of being on clear blue vinyl, is that the track listing on this one's a little different than the UK version that came out. This one, the B-side on this is stellar. As There's a Light That Never Goes Out, which is on The Queen is Dead, which is a fantastic song. Again, one of their probably more well-known songs. Beautiful song, absolutely fantastic. And then after that it has The Queen is Dead on there. So A-side Panic and those two killer B-sides right there. I think, in my opinion, better than the B-sides that were on the original UK 12-inch single. So if you can find this sort of German Teldec release on this clear blue vinyl, probably worth it, not only because it's on cool blue vinyl, but it's got really good track listing on it too. And the last album of theirs I have, and unfortunately probably my least favorite of the ones I own, is Rank, their live album. Not sure how well it's going to show up, but it is a gold stamp promo. I think that's kind of common with this album, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure promo copies are relatively easy to come by. It's a live album, like I said. I believe it was recorded when they were supporting Queen is Dead, if I remember right. The track listing kind of backs that up. It was released after the band disbanded, so sort of a cash-in attempt, I guess, by Rough Trade and Sire to kind of recoup some of the losses there. The track listing isn't the best, in my opinion. You know, it's got some highs and lows, but it's okay. You gotta kind of be in the mood for it. I'd rather listen to the studio albums, honestly, if I had a choice. But still not a bad one to have, you know, from a completionist standpoint. So that's my Smiths collection. I know I don't have probably the most comprehensive collection out there. There's some stuff I'm missing. I don't have their fourth studio album. I'm always on the lookout for that. But Smith stuff doesn't come around too often where I'm at. I know a lot of people say it's common and they see it all the time, but at least for me, it seems hard to come by. I think most people that have Smith stuff tend to keep it because they like it. It's not something that really gets sold a ton. I do have a couple Morrissey 12-inch singles. I don't really like much of his solo stuff, but you know, I came across these for a couple bucks each and figured why not. Interesting Drug and Suede Head. This is a really good track. I like this one a lot. But yeah, that's it for the Smiths. Thanks for watching, and this is n8great321. Signing out.
Just like like I did.